Yeah, I know what I have arranged.
That's why I call you.
I just left. I just see 6:30 and I left. I go.
Democracy draws its strength from people and their voices, their choices and their participation in shaping their societies. It flourishes when rights are protected, particularly for those most often left behind. Nigeria's democracy has gradually evolved for 26 years and counting. Although it cannot be said that Nigeria's democracy is one of the best globally, the largest democracy in Africa serves as inspiration to other countries with transition from one democratic administration to another, to change of government among political parties. How will Nigeria continue to strengthen its democracy? How do you think more Nigerians can understand that their voices can be heard and their choices respected? This will be our focus on Nigeria today. Thanks for joining us. I'm your carrier, Clinton. Now, with me in the studio for this conversation, talking about upholding democratic principle, is Shaba Ibrahim. He's a former House of Representatives member and also former Nigerian Bar Association, former chairman, Nigerian Bar Association, Lokoja. Thank you for coming to Nigeria today.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, Nigerians.
Okay. 26 years of uninterrupted democracy. Now, in your own view, how would you say Nigeria has fared democratically?
Thank you very much. Once again, good evening, Nigerians. And let me congratulate all for today. It's the International Day of Democracy. My understanding of democracy is the government of the people, by the people and for the people. And so you could say that from the inception of civilian rule, there has been an attempt to not just install democratic structures, but instill democratic values in our system of governance. And I would say, without mincing words, that it's gratifying to know that this has been some uninterrupted journey thus far. 26 years is not, it's no child's play. And Nigeria, as far as the practice of democracy is concerned, is still fledgling. As far as I'm concerned, we're still trying to learn the ropes. It's a long, tortuous learning process. And for those of us who are in the system as politicians, I think a lot needs to be put in place to be able to not just bear the name a democratic state, but we walk the talk by ensuring that we build democratically strong institutions as opposed to building men that are stronger than the institutions themselves. That is why some of the bastions of democracy in the world, like the USA, that is why they're surviving thus far. When you have institutions that are very, very strong and can rein in otherwise powerful men. and still maintain their sanity, then you can say hallelujah. But in that direction, in that contention, I would say that we're still learning the ropes and we have a long way to go. But all the same, it is congratulations to us. At least we've not had any interruptions that will take us back to square one. And I can only hope that things will get better by His grace.
Now, having said that, earlier on you mentioned that democracy, basically for the people, it's government for the people.
Yes.
You know, so talking about people's voices, people's choices being respected, their rights being respected, yes, and all of that. So how well would you say we have done or we are doing in that regard in respecting democratic principles?
You see, the Nigerian experience is a cocktail of the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you ask me, in the last 26 years. For some of us, it would look like we're taking too long to learn. Talking about the right to choose, I mean, the right of the right of choice of leadership, which has some direct correlation with electoral reforms and rules. I think we need to do a lot more to be able to secure our democracy, because a lot is connected to the system of propping up leadership. When the system is okay, is transparent and durable enough, then you can't say that people's votes would count in how leadership, I mean, emerge ultimately. But in our example, I mean, we've had some credible elections that are worth defending. We've had others that have fallen short of rational standards. I mean, looking at international best practices. But like I said, ab initio, there is still room for improvement. The leadership, howsoever, I recall when President late Umar Yar'Adua of blessed memory, he was seized of sufficient candor to admit that the process that propped him up was significantly flawed. And so he embarked on what you call electoral reforms, at least before death struck. I think we still have that problem up till this day, because most Nigerians do not even believe that their votes will count anymore. And whenever you have that kind of despondency staring the people in the face, it is not too good for democratic norms or tenets. A lot of people believe, and if you look at it, voters' apathy is growing by the day, because people believe, irrespective of what you do, it is not he who votes that determines who emerges, but those who count the votes. And in this connection, you're talking directly to institutions like INEC. So if you have that kind of attitude, if you have that kind of view, howsoever flawed it is, but it's not a minority view, then I think we really need to sit up if we want to get this right.
No, you talked about improving, our institutions. You said it's better, like from your, if I get you correctly, from the first or your opening remark.
Yes.
You talked about building a strong institution,
an enduring institution, rather than individuals.
Individuals that are stronger than institutions. Yes. So tell us exactly.
I'll give you the Nigerian example. The president is stronger than everybody. With all due respect, the president is stronger than everybody. The president is stronger than... You see, by understanding of democracy, say, we run constitutional democracy is like it's run on a tripod. You have legislative powers vested by Section 4 in the National Assembly, which comprise the Senate and the House of Reps. You have executive powers under Section 5 and judicial powers under Section 6. If you look at in actual practice, what we see is an institution. Let me give an example of the legislature. An institution that has willy-nilly surrendered its own sovereignty to the executive in this country. I'm not saying this by way of conjecture. I'm saying it by the utterances of the leadership of some of these institutions, where the leadership of the National Assembly, for instance, will come out and say, whatever the president brings to us is fair, we're going to pass it. I don't think that's good enough for our democracy. We have to be very fair and square about this. How that came about, I don't know, because what you're supposed to have is there's separation of power. Yes, I agree it cannot be in watertight compartments, but there must be some form of staying on your lane that will guarantee that, look, every arm of government is able to do the job assigned to it under the Constitution. For instance, I'll give you an example. The legislature is supposed to oversight the executive. When the legislature willingly submits, even albeit gratuitously, to the whims of the executive, where is that check and balance going to come from? Democracy is founded on check and balance. You must be able to, and accountability in government. If the leader of the legislature said, look, whatever, they made no exclusion, and that's a very dangerous statement to make under a democracy. You know, whatever the sovereign says, I mean, the president brings before this house is as good as passed.
So, which means nobody is being held accountable for
no,
anything.
Because I don't even see that kind of institution being able to oversight the executive or even another arm of government. And if I take it further, you look at the judiciary has, with all due respect, a lot to do to be able to strengthen our democracy. Because if you look at it, as the gatekeepers, so to speak, they are in charge of reining in errant arms and institutions. I just want to make a quick reference to the recent case in Rivers State where, upon the president exercising powers under the Constitution, there are a lot who thought that that power was not properly exercised, but that's not the fulcrum of my submissions here. What I want to point out is people submitted before the Supreme Court a case for the court to determine whether that power had been validly exercised under the law. Till this moment, up until the expiration or the near expiration of the 6-month term of the power of, of the state of emergency imposed on Rivers, there has not been any pronouncement by the Supreme Court. And what I see, what I fear, at the risk of sounding immodest, is the courts have, on their own, refrained, with all due respect to them, from adjudicating on this very, very fundamental issue, such that we cannot even have an established precedence when such a power is exercised in future. Now, after the expiration of the state of emergency, perhaps the Supreme Court will call up the matter. If the matter comes up, what you are going to hear from the court is, oh, this is some, you call it, this is an academic exercise. It's no longer of value because this rest, which is the issue of the suspension of democratic institutions in Rivers, has already been restored. So why are we still here talking? That singular omission to act has deprived us of a clear-cut position on how that power is supposed to be exercised moving forward.
So how do we remedy this situation? Because from what you're saying right now, it seems, you know, these two institutions, talking about the National Assembly, yes, the legislature, yes, and the judiciary, yes, that are supposed to be like the watchdog.
You see, these three arms are equals. The executive arm, of course, there has to be, amongst the equals, there is force among equals, what you call primus inter pares, and that is the head of the government, that's the head of the executive, which is the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That is. But you see, when the judiciary, with all due respect, because that's my immediate constituencies, I'm worried about it. When the judiciary...
You've actually tested both legislature and the judiciary.
Yes, I have tested the executive, I have tested the legislature, I have associated with the judiciary. That of judiciary is more permanent because I will continue to be a lawyer till my last breath by His grace. So when you have such a situation where as you can tolerate the system can tolerate an inept executive. The system may be able to manage an equally inept legislature, but the system will definitely collapse with a judiciary that is not doing what it's supposed to do under the laws. As you know, God forbid, everything is lost when your gatekeeper becomes the assailant. You see, as they are supposed to put everybody in check. And if you refrain from doing so for whatever reasons, you have left everything in there. What you, if you like, in economics, you call it market forces. Everything will just come in and just go, and it's a build-up to anarchy. So I want to see a judiciary that is more proactive, that would rain down. The judiciary, by my own interpretation, is the strongest arm of government, because they can strike down on executive actions that are unconstitutional and so forth and so on. But when you refrain from even giving a pronouncement on something so fundamental, something so divisive of our polity, as the issue of, for instance, a declaration of state of emergency in Rivers State, I mean, you're just preparing the scaffolding for future occurrence that will not be able to have the precedence to look back to and say, look, in a recent decision of this Apex Court, this has been adjudged unconstitutional.
Thank you, Shaba. We're going to take a short break now. The conversation will continue after the break. Don't go away.
Implementation of the ruling is also dependent on another aspect or another arm of government.
Nowhere in the world will allow, under digital economy, for banks not to be dispensing domestic currency in that economy.
What will make this one different? We want to know what they do as occupation. All of these are attributes that our questions have been designed to investigate.
In a few years to come, we see that they are all around, they're all crannies and everywhere in Nigeria, telling people to cooperate.
Welcome to Nigeria Today.
Welcome back. This is still Nigeria Today, and we're looking at upholding democratic principles. And of course, I have a gentleman here with me in the studio for this conversation. Now, Shaba, of course, you've talked so much about the legislature, the judiciary, of course, and of course the executive. Now, looking at the way you painted the picture, it does appear that there's still a lot to be done, but the way forward now is the issue. Now, what practical steps can citizens, because every other, they're just there, they are now the people that will maybe rise up to ensure that these institutions work as they should. So what practical steps can they take to ensure that leaders are held accountable without undermining the stability, the national stability?
Well, from my own, you see, from my own perspective, I think everything still boils down to leadership. You see, our leaders must be seized of sufficient candor to admit that all is not well with the system. And if I want to quote former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, he said this, and I think it's very opposite in the circumstance. He said, look, it's easy to wake somebody who is sleeping than to wake that one who is pretending to be asleep. If we agree that something is wrong, then we can start talking about solutions. But if we pretend, and pretenders are not in short supply, if the social media is awash with people who are singing to high heaven the praises of, sometimes I wonder who actually prescribed democracy for the average black man. I'm sorry to say that. Who prescribed democracy? Because our practice of it looks to me not to be in tandem with the intendment of those who framed the Constitution to say that we need to have democratic institutions in place. And the way to go about it first is, for one, like I said earlier on, the judiciary should assert itself. It has the powers. If the judiciary is assertive of itself, there are instances where you say, look, because this case is novel, we've not had anything like this, and like some of our late justices will say, look, if there is no precedent anywhere, create one. The one you are always relying upon was created by some other people. Create one. That's what you call judicial activism. Some will even call it radicalism, if you like. Create one. Think out of the box. Otherwise, we'll continue to go in this vicious circle and not knowing where to break. If the leaders agree, for instance, at the National Assembly level, I've been there, and I know that if the National Assembly is going to be alive to its full responsibilities, with all the enabling environment provided by the executive, as the case may be. And that brings me into the issue of financial autonomy and what have you for all other institutions.
Because I was about coming to that.
Yes.
Because I'm not, okay.
Yes. You see, the judiciary, the legislature are somehow held back by the fact that the executive controls all the level of finance, those things that are able to help you do your job seamlessly. If at the end of every year you have to go cap in hand to the executive, I've seen governors assemble judges say they are buying cars for them. They are building houses for judges. Are you getting my point? And I've seen a very embarrassing situation where the Senate president, with all due respect to him, will go and say he's representing Mr. President at a function. Hell no. You don't belong to the executive. The president has a vice who should be doing that if he's indisposed for any reason. Okay. And I'll come to, let me bring it. You see, it has a way.
So what is wrong in that, really?
I'll tell you what is wrong. Like I said, these institutions are supposed to be kept separate. There are places they meet, but certainly not at the level of representation. A member of the head of the executive cannot pick the head of another. It's a means of, it implies subordination. It implies that, look, he is under him. You cannot be under somebody and legitimately superintend over his affairs by exercising the powers of oversight. So I think there's everything morally wrong with that. I don't want to even say legally. There's some moral, I think there's everything wrong with that morally. So if you have, let everybody keep their lane. There are points of convergence, like where you have the president having to assent to bills, effectively passed by the legislature. That's some form of legislative lawmaking functions too. So we can understand that one is prescribed by law. But you can't go as Senate President and say you're standing in for Mr. President. It's not your boss in that context.
What then is the role of everybody in trying to ensure, we're talking about the civil society groups, yes, the citizens, in ensuring that these institutions
I want to keep within the bounds of civility. So I'm not going to prescribe anything radical, but I want to say that the civil society organization, the citizens, should realize that, look, we all have a duty to make this democracy work, and by so doing, let everybody be able to. We can advocacy will do a lot for us. The literacy rate in Nigeria is not high enough for us to attain so we need a lot of enlightenment. Let the people realize, and I make bold to say that perhaps most of these actors do not even realize that what they are doing is wrong. I'm sure it surprised you that I saw something wrong with that. Asking the Senate President to go and represent Mr. President.
I wanted you to educate the people to know exactly, where the...
I am saying the Senate President is the head of the legislature. The legislature is an arm of government, distinct from the executive and the judiciary. It's just like asking the Chief Justice of Nigeria. That would be sacrilege, to go and represent Mr. President. That's some form of subordination. If, for any reason, there is a matter before the Chief Justice, before the courts, that the executive are being accused of some infraction or what have you, how do you... So you minimize your contact with each other so that it does not, for any reason, vitiate your powers to carry out your functions as envisaged or as spelled out in the Constitution.
So enlightenment?
Enlightenment is one. Yes, enlightenment is one. And also an appeal to our leaders. and appeal to a leader. The power is transient. There's nothing you do today that everybody wants history to be able to record them. I referenced late President Yar'Adua because he did it. We must look ourselves in the eyes and be able to say, look, let these things go like this. Let X remain on X lane, Y remain on Y lane. And that way we're able to do it. Otherwise, the other prescription is dreadful. And I'm not going to prescribe that. I won't go there. Yes, I'm not going to go anywhere near that. But
thank you very much, Shaba Ibrahim, the former chairman, Nigerian Bar Association, Lokoja, and also former House of Representatives member. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure always.
With us.
Thank you, Nigerians, for listening.
And thank you for being part of the program. I'm Mikaria Clinton. Goodbye.